Hi, I'm Ashley with Accomplished Quilting, and today for the live video, I wanted to talk to you about thread break. And so I'm working with a Mach 3 autopilot on an original Innova, and so you'll see this yellow cable here. This yellow cable on the original Innova is the thread break sensor. All right. So you can see the thread break sensor is wired in on this machine. The thread break sensor is compatible with any original Innova that has lightning stitch on it. And it is also compatible with any M series machine. So it is something that can be added. Usually when someone adds robotics to their machine, or even Panavision, or if they're going to be doing lots of panographs, the thread break sensor is a great accessory to add. Today in this video I am working with the Mach 3 autopilot and I'm stitching a pattern in a block. And what I'm going to demonstrate today is how the thread break sensor works and then how to use it properly with Mach 3. So if you experience a thread break or your bobbin runs out and your thread break alarms, how you go back into stitching that pattern. So I have some stitching here, but what I wanted to start with is how the thread break sensor functions. So I'm going to move this handle up out of the way so you can see on camera where the cable goes down. There's a sensor here. And so this is the sensor right there. That's the thread break sensor. And a key component to the thread break sensor is the check spring. And so if I tug, if you can you see that light in the video?
Go ahead, do it again.
If I tug on the cord, you'll see that yellow light blinks. And so that blinking is normal and is telling us the thread break sensor will be functioning properly. One of the phone calls I get as a 24/7 support representative for Accomplished Quilting, one of the calls that I receive is that my thread break sensor is alarming all the time, but I have beautiful stitches. Sometimes the stitches aren't also still beautiful, but it's still stitching and my thread break sensor alarm is going off. That could be because the thread has come out of this thread guide. So this thread guide is what enables the check spring to do its job. So if I were to take, I'm going to try to do this, I might not be able to. If I were to take the thread gently out of that thread guide, this is tricky. Okay, so I've removed it from that thread guide. If you see when I go to stitch now, and I'm imitating stitching by tugging on the thread here. So if the needle's going up and down and I'm tugging, that check spring is not moving. And if you go up a little bit, that light is staying lit and not blinking, even though I am tugging on the thread. The check spring is moving, but only slightly. So if you have that alarm going off and the machine is still stitching and the thread is not broken, check first that your thread is actually through that first guide following the check spring. So when that's engaged, again, that light is blinking. So let's say the light is blinking, you do have a thread break, and the machine does not stop. So something I need to clarify is that the purpose of the thread break sensor combined with robotics is that it will stop the machine when the thread break sensor goes off. If you're hand stitching on Panavision or doing panographs from the rear of the machine will alarm and obviously you would physically stop. But when combined with robotics, the machine will stop itself with a thread break. So let's say your thread is breaking or your bobbin is running out. You've run out of thread, it's not properly stitching, but the machine is not stopping and the thread break alarm is not going off. The next thing to check is on this screen. So Randy, if you can.
Oh, this screen.
Randy's my photographer here. Under setup. So I'm going to do that again. So from Mach 3, and this is showing this menu because I'm in the middle of stitching. Your menu would normally look like this. You would hit setup, which is in the lower right hand corner. And this screen is pressure sensitive. So I can tap that and wait 3 seconds.
You tapped it twice.
If I tap it twice, it won't I have to tap it and wait. There we go. At the very top, there's a little bit of glare here. Let's try to get a good, there it is. Thread break sensor right now is set to 3. So what that number means is the machine will experience 3 irregular movements of the check spring before it will stop. So when you're stitching at 11 stitches per inch, depending on your speed, 3 stitches out of 11 within 1 inch is very fast. 3 or 4 is an ideal setting for the thread break sensor. But with that in mind, it's going to move ahead 3 stitches before it stops. You don't want to set it to 1 because it might alarm more often than it should. So right now mine is set to 3. I'm going to go back to Mach 3. And I do have a little bit of slack in my thread since I was playing with it. So I am going to pick up my thread and start over. So I'm going to pick up my bobbin thread here, my top thread. If I were tying off using the John James needles, I would want to leave some tails there. So I'd have these tails. And I'm going to do this a few times. So you can see I have the machine stopped. How do I start again? When I hit stop before the video, this menu pops up. So this is if you hit stop. If I hit edit, the machine will clear out what is already sewn and go back to where I can edit on the screen. So we don't want to hit edit. Another tip for you, I actually just did it. This might not be something a lot of people know. This menu tends to pop up over your crosshairs. So if you need to see what's behind it, you can grab these windows by the dark title bar. So I can grab this window and move it out of the way. And so this is a touch screen. You can use a stylus, like one of our Accomplished Quilting pens, your finger, or obviously a mouse, a wireless mouse or wired-in mouse on the computer itself. So if I want to move this window out of the way, I can grab it. So for this particular instance, I hit stop, I fixed something, I'm going to hit resume and move because I've moved the head to cut my threads. So I'm going to choose move. And again, I'm going to do this a couple times in this video. But what I want to highlight on the screen is, I'm going to zoom in. When you opt to resume, this pink, it's very faint on the video, this pink line comes up. You'll see the pink line has a large square, not very large, but a large square on the end of it. And then the pink line has a tail. And what that's indicating, the square, the pink square, is indicating where the needle will start, or where you would pick up your thread, where the needle will move to, and the tail is the direction the machine is going to stitch. And I picked this pattern in particular as an example to show you today because every leaf has overstitching. And so that is the hardest point for a quilter to recover from, is if there's overstitching, because you don't want it to stitch over what you've already stitched. So I'm going to choose move, and when I hit move, take a look at the quilt. I have the center of the leaf stitched one direction, and it should start there and come back this way. So when I look at the pink line on the screen, I want the pink square to be where my stitching stopped, where my tails are, and then I want the stitching to come out of the leaf. So it shouldn't redo this line. I want it to come out and carry on into the pattern. So I'm going to pay more attention to the pink line on the screen than I am physically where the needle is. So when you're doing a recovery, when you're starting after stopping, whether that's due to you stopping or a thread break, you don't want to drop the needle. You don't want to try to get it exactly there because it might be stitching the wrong direction. So the best way to do this is to look at the screen, and I'm not even looking at the needle right now. What I'm going to do is watch this pink line until it's exactly where I want it to be.
Take it closer.
Yes. So as I move the head, my photographer got a bit closer here. As I move the head, you'll see the pink line move around. So this would be the wrong direction, having the pink line point. Whoop, there we go. So I need the pink dot to be at the end and the line to be pointing out of the leaf. So that looks like the right spot. Notice on the screen, my crosshairs are not exactly on that point, but remember, I'm choosing move, and move says move to the point closest to the needle, and that pink dot is going to be the point closest to the needle. So if we go back over here, I'm going to choose move. The machine will think for a second to be show the computer screen. And then I have a chance here. So the machine engaged, and this is my preview. So I have a chance before I hit continue. Continue means the machine is going to move to that point. So the machine has not moved at all, and I have a preview. So if this red stitching matches what has already stitched on my quilt, then I know I've chosen the correct point. So I can see the red stitching goes up into the leaf, but not back out on this line. So this is my preview and my chance to say, yes, I chose the right point, and I can choose continue. Now you can do this right from the sew head or the computer screen. So I want you to watch the sew head, take a wider view so you can see the needle. I'm going to choose continue. And so I want you guys to watch the needle when I hit continue. The needle moved and then stopped. So it moved exactly to that pink box. And at this point, this is when I'm going to grab my thread and press pick up. Now, if you're in the habit of pushing the machine away to pick up your thread, this is where you're going to want to watch Nancy's video about flossing, because you don't want to move the machine again. So the machine is in the correct spot. I've picked up my thread, my bobbin, and I'm going to floss.
What happens if you move the machine again?
If you do move the machine by mistake, it will go back to that point and start stitching. So it's not a total loss, but I just get in the habit of not moving the machine after it is where I want it. So I'm just pushing under the foot and grabbing my bobbin thread. So generally, when you're restarting after a thread break or after a stop, you're going to have the starting set of tails and you're going to have the stopping set of tails. So you're going to want to grab those together and look at the screen and know that it's going to stitch this way. So I'm going to hold my hand and hold the stitches, hold the threads in the opposite direction of which the machine is going to go. I'm not going to pull and tug and move the quilt surface. I'm just going to hold them gently. And so I generally hold it right back over where it's already stitched, and I'm going to hit continue. It takes a starting stitch and then carries on stitching in perfectly exactly the right spot.
You can see the tails out of the way.
And the tails are out of the way, yes. Come up to me. So I have it started in exactly the right spot, and that was after I hit stop. So I do want to show you what happens if the thread breaks. So I'm going to imitate a thread break by cutting my thread, and we'll see how quickly it responds.
Three stitches.
3 stitches. So if we look, I'll actually move the machine so you can see the needle holes. But we have 1, 2, 3 stitches. And it stopped.
It's really cool.
Perfect. I love this feature. The thread break sensor is fantastic. So now the thread broke because I cut it. Obviously thread breaks occur because a lot of things are happening. It could be tension's too tight. That's all information for another video. Regardless of how the thread broke, what you do next. Before we get to recovering the thread on the screen with the mechanics, we always want to check our thread path. Even if the bobbin ran out and it stopped, we do want to check that the thread is through all of the proper thread guides. So the number one thing to check, again after a thread break, is that this thread guide is threaded. Otherwise you'll get a thread break immediately after. So double check your thread path, figure out why your thread broke. Whenever you're troubleshooting, so if your thread is breaking and you're frustrated, whenever you're troubleshooting, you always want to try one fix at a time. So resist the urge to change lots of things and then see if it worked, because then you won't know what caused it. So that's just a side tip, to change one thing at a time. Again, the actual thread tension and thread breaks will be addressed in other videos. But I'm going to rethread my needle. When you have a true top thread break, so let's say the thread frayed and broke, maybe my tension's too tight, maybe the thread was caught on the bottom of the cone, what I need to remember in this instance is that my bobbin thread is still attached. So my very first step after checking the thread path is going to be to go back to the spot where the thread stopped and pick up my bobbin thread. Now, take a look up here. On the machine, take a look at this white button. When I press the white button right now, nothing's happening. So take a look at the screen. While this error code is up, it's not necessarily an error code, it's an alert. While this alert is displayed, my buttons are disabled. So I need to press OK and say I recognize the thread break occurred. When it goes to this screen is now when my buttons are alive again. And I can pick up my thread and grab my bobbin. All right, so this loop here is my bobbin thread. So I'm going to cut that. And when I push away, it took one of the tails. And then I have the rest of the top thread because I cut it with scissors. You might not always have that tail there. Because I cut it with scissors, I already have the top thread laying there. If I did not have that top thread, I would have to pick back stitches. The best tool for that is going to be the thread picker. And so if you haven't purchased a thread picker, it's a lifesaver. But I'll talk about the thread picker another time. So I have my top thread and my bobbin thread hanging out. I'm going to go through the thread break recovery for robotics at this point. So again, I'm at resume, edit, pickup. I'm going to move back to the computer screen, and I'm going to now to pan on the autopilot. So my crosshairs are down here, and I can't see them very well, so I need to move the screen. On my mouse, if you don't know this already, if you have a mouse attached to your autopilot, if you push down on that roller ball, push down and move, that acts as pan for the autopilot. Or if you take two fingers and put them on the screen, that is also pan. So two fingers, and now I'm where I can see my pink dot. So again, I'm going to pay more attention to the screen, and I'm going to bounce that pink dot around, and I'm going to look where my thread ended. So it ended right there. It's not a bad idea to start it a stitch or two back so that you can take care of those threads beautifully with your John James needles. So 1 or 2 stitches back is fine because you can always pick them out. What you want to avoid is accidentally starting 1 or 2 stitches ahead, because it's really hard to just get 2 stitches in there. So starting back a little bit is better than starting forward a little bit. So I'm going to put it back a little bit, and then I'm going to look at the screen. So I'm putting it right over that. I'm going to look at the screen and look for my pink dot. I'm going to choose resume. And again, you can do that on the sew head or on the screen. And then once the pink dot is where I want it, I'm going to choose move. Then I wait. The screen says loading resume profile. The machine will think for a moment.
Oh, I missed it. It moved.
That's okay. It thinks pretty quickly. It processes pretty quickly. And then Randy, on the screen here, I'm going to choose continue. And it moved right to that spot. Now, if it didn't move to where I want it to, take a look at the display screen again. Sorry you're going back and forth. If it did not go where I wanted it to go, I can hit stop. And I have the same resume or edit pickup options. So I'll just choose resume again, move again. This time you'll see it think. So it's thinking. It's done thinking. Choose continue. Uh-oh. That happens sometimes. If that happens, move it right back to the spot. I must have got my order of operations mixed up. Happens to the best of us. So I'm just going to move it back to that stop. I'm going to choose resume. Move. It says loading resume profile. Thinks for a second. Choose continue. It moved to the spot. Pick up. I'm going to floss underneath to grab my bobbin thread. Hold both tails out of the way and choose continue. Now I do want to pause it for a second and point out to you right here. The reason these thread tails are off to the side is because that's where I picked them up. So with the thread picker, I am going to recenter those. So as soon as I use the thread picker to pick this stitch, those two tails are going to come right over here. So you do want to be careful where you do your pickup. But that's just so I can see the tail. So you can obviously see this was a perfect thread recovery because this stitch line is beautifully matched. It's just my tails are in the wrong spot. And that's where the thread picker and John James needles combined are going to save the day. So, there are other things that can occur. Let's say the thread break happened and you were done quilting for the night. You got a phone call, you had to go somewhere, the thread broke, it's in the middle of the pattern, you have to leave the machine, you shut it off. There are ways to recover from those challenges as well. And I have a very thorough video or tutorial on recovering from all different kinds of thread breaks, whether it's the bobbin has run out, whether you've moved the quilt after. Those are challenges you might see. So I brought in my computer here. So this is my laptop. This is my laptop here. On the Accomplished Quilting website, our header up here has different drop-down menus. One of the pages is education and tutorials. And so if we were to click on that page, that's where I am right now. And I can scroll down. Library of video tutorials. See all of our video tutorials, click here. So when I click there, I'm taken over to this website that talks about our YouTube channel and then does display the many, many, many tutorials we've done. And my thread break video is in the blue section. Oh, Randy. Fixing a thread break right here. And so that covers a lot of the different challenges that you might see related to a thread break. So this video, bless you. This video was by request from Cindy Fleck, so thank you for the suggestion. If you have suggestions for other videos, please drop them in the comments and we'll try to get to them. This whole venture of AQ Live is to help make your quilting easy. That's our main goal here at Accomplished Quilting. So thank you for watching the video today, and I hope you'll join us at 3 p.m. Thank you for your business.